Good afternoon, dear colleagues, friends and guests. I'm really happy to welcome at the Kyiv International 68 now today a Croatian artist from Zagreb, Igor Grubić, who is a multimedia artist. He has been active in the field since the beginning of the 90s, and he works really with a huge variety of different media. His works include site-specific interventions in the public space, photography, film. From 2000 he started to work as a producer and author of documentaries, TV reports and socially committed commercials. His works exhibited in a wide range of different international institutions, including Manifesta, Istanbul Biennial, different photo festivals, Palais de Tokyo, Thessaloniki Biennial, MoMA at New York, and so on. Igor Grubić, it's not his first time in Kyiv, because he, in 2015, was also a participant of the School of Kyiv, Kyiv Biennial 2015, when he presented his two pieces, East Side Story and Monument. And I'm really pleased that he managed to come again, because I believe that his work has a high relevance to the current situation in Ukraine after Maidan, and it resonates a lot with local developments and tendencies here in Ukraine. For example, as for the already mentioned piece East Side Story, which is a two-channel video installation, part of which we just seen, in which Igor Grubić deals with the outbreaks of far-right violence directed at gay pride parades in Zagreb and Belgrade. And I would say that the author really deals with this problem in a pretty transgressive way. Or another actuality, which also sounds very up-to-date for the current Ukrainian situation, meaning our so-called decommunization campaign. Igor deals with this problem in another piece, Monument, which is a poetic documentary on the political issues of memory and monuments. That's basically a visual essay about the conditions and, so to say, life of monuments, predominantly anti-fascist monuments in the ex-Yugo region, also questioning their purpose for today. So, yeah, Igor Grubić is an artist who is dealing with war and its aftermath in his works, and I think that this topicality is of high urgency for us here. And today, this time, Igor will present several of his public works, but mainly concentrating on his project 366 Liberation Rituals, which consists of different micro-political interventions into the public space that he was doing on the everyday basis throughout 2008 and part of 2009. The starting point for this project 10 years ago, it was basically the 40th anniversary of the 68, but at the same time this project is really pretty multi-layered, as probably the event of the 68 itself is, because it has a lot of references to conceptual art practices of the former Yugoslavian region, also referring to Jean-Luc Godard political movies and cultural strategies of the late 60s and early 70s. And today, with this presentation, we are somehow logically continuing the yesterday's one made by Experimental Jet Set on the spatiality and the notion of the city, because if I were to generalize it, I would say that Igor Grubić is an artist who is working in a kind of a Joseph Beuys tradition, because he's basically, what he's doing, especially in terms of public space, it's about healing violent traumas in the city space using artistic or performative means. And I do believe that this approach has even a very practical political dimension, and we can also observe it in Ukraine, because if you don't have this kind of performative reenactment of trauma, then you will get a violent acting out, and that's unfortunately what is actually happening in our country recently. Thank you so much again for coming. I wish you a nice evening, and after the As the presentation, we will have a Q&A session, and you are welcome to participate. Thanks so much.
Thank you for this introduction. And as I mentioned earlier, thank you very much for your patience and that you come on this event this Sunday. So, as Vasil mentioned, I will present mostly public artworks, which I did in the public space. But I can say something about the introduction, actually, how I started to think and to work in that way. So, me as a, let's say, young artist starting as a photographer in the middle school and the late beginning of the 90s. But this beginning of the 90s, unfortunately, happened the war in Croatia, and the war was last for full 5 years. So let's say for me and my family and the whole citizens in Croatia, Serbia, Bosnia, this Balkan area was quite traumatic. And these shocking events actually forced me to start to think in which way I'm participating in society, in which way I'm contributing something to society. And as I mentioned, I started to work as a photographer first, but since this period in the 90s, during the war and the post-war period, it's happened that because lots of intellectuals went out of the country to live in another peaceful European countries, and it's happened that cultural scene in Zagreb and Croatia was really happened to be really small. It shrinked somehow. And since I was going around attending all these cultural events in the galleries, museums, I realized that only small group of people, like 50, the most 30 to 50 people, was circulating in the gallery spaces. So I realized that if I want to start to work as an artist, I would like to communicate with a wider public, because as you know, this group of people who are already attending these same events actually have the same life attitudes and political attitudes toward the life. So I need to excuse because of my English. Sometimes I'm missing the words, but I hope you will understand it anyway. So I was thinking, you know, if we speak all the time critics about the political situation, about the situation in the society, all this communication will stay only between us in this small circle. So I was starting to think how to get out of this circle. You know, if I'm going to create an exhibition for 30 people only, which already have the same opinion as me, which message I'm going to send to the others, and how I'm going to influence these others to think in a different way, to start to have a certain kind of a critic, also critical opinion. And so I decided that I will go out in the public spaces. It was 1997 when I made these decisions. I started to create several performances and several small interventions in the public spaces. But then I realized that I need to make, let's say, something bigger, provocative in a certain way as a protest. And I decided to create certain kind of references to the one of the most important acts in the public space which happened 1968. Before all these 68 movements in the whole world. It was the beginning of the 68, during the night of the 10th of January. '68, the group of young artists in Croatia painted the whole square. This is a square in the Diocletian Palace in Split. They painted poetically, it wasn't politically referenced, the whole square in a red. So it formed the form of a red rectangle. So I was thinking that this rectangle could be like one form of one shape of from the suprematism or Russian constructivism, and I decided to react with another form of suprematism, a black circle. But I decided at the same time to do a strictly political thing. As a protest, so I put, you can see there, a message which was written exactly 30 years after the red Pedestal. That's how the group was called. The Pedestal, this square, reflecting the public consciousness. So I was suggesting that this pedestal as a certain kind of symbolical, magical mirror reflecting what's going on in a society in this post-war period in Croatia. And I suggested that this black circle is a black spot on the soul of each individual who decided to be a passive in society and not to be active toward the situation which were lived. So I need to describe this post-war period, and the war period was really quite horrifying and traumatic, and because it was a period of the strong nationalism. My trauma was the time coming from the mixed family. So I can say that I was half Serb and half Croat. So I didn't want to think at all in this way of national identities. I didn't care about this at all. When I was raised as a child, nobody taught me to think about nationalities. And so for my family the war was quite traumatic because we've been threatened to leave the country. We've been horrified even in the worst way. I don't want to describe these moments now. But what was also important for this period was because in that period this right-oriented government was controlling all media. And the government was treating every intellectual who was thinking opposite than them and who was criticizing them as a certain kind of a betrayer or public enemy. But at the same time, the government was during this privatization process, because we've been socialist country before, and now during the war, slowly becoming a capitalist country. During this privatization process, all public property was stolen. Maybe it happened the same in Ukraine. And so it was one of the biggest robberies of the public property factories, firms in Europe. And the government in this privatization process became amazingly rich. So all this manipulation, war manipulation, that Croatia is fighting for a free country which will be like a paradise for all of us, actually become a paradise only for them. So at the same time was happening that government needed to boost, to invest the money in the traditional art, in the folklore art, because government was thinking, of course, that in that way they are strengthening the national identity. So contemporary art wasn't supported at all in this moment. Only income financially which came in this period came from the Soros. So because of all these reasons, I decided to go out in the public and to create a protest. So I did how you get escape? Sorry.
I think you.
Bravo. Okay.
If you want me to remove the back.
No. It's okay. It's good red color. So I did this action completely legally. During the night on the same anniversary, I decided to wait exactly 1 year. I get the idea to make it in 1997, but I decided to make it 1 year later because of the anniversary of '68 movement and the anniversary of the Red Pedestal. And I was wearing a suit like uniform, like a public person who was painting the color on this square, and every citizens who pass and ask me what I'm doing, I said that I'm doing scenography for one theater play. And I did action anonymously, and I called the whole project Black Pedestal, because the group was called the Red Pedestal. So I wanted to suggest that nowadays, in these 90s, the reality is black. And it could happen, how to say, I was only 28 old. So I was really scared in this moment. I was shaking, full of fear. But anyway, I decided to work in this public sphere. And this experience gave me certain kind of really important experience for my artistic practice, to learn that it's possible to really make something with the artwork and even to influence the movements in the society. So what was happened? It could happen that the public was reacting without any kind of attention. So it could happen that it was like a, let's say, child game, that somebody painted a square black. But it happened opposite, that next day all media was full of this action. All media was full of next 7 days, full of reactions. And so somehow I realized that I struck the nerve and that I need to go further. So as I started to work first, as I mentioned, as a public intervention, then I realized that I can even go further and make a media reaction. So I started, because that wasn't period with internet. So I couldn't use the internet, and because citizens in Croatia, because of the crisis, didn't have internet in this period, computers in this period also. Only few, firms or individuals. And so I called a few independent radio stations which wasn't controlled by the government, and I gave them interview, strictly political interview. And I also sent a letter to the one independent newspapers, and they published the newspapers. And each time when I did something, it created a new wave. So then it's happened that this is, like, say, graphic. Then it's happened that in the May, so that was January, then in a May, beginning of May, end of April, beginning of May, it was a huge contemporary art exhibition. I sent them all newspapers articles which I connected and collected about this artwork, and I exhibited the whole room full of newspapers articles suggesting this is a media work. And the work get the prize and the second prize, and they contact me and ask me, will I get to pick up the prize? And I decided to come as a contact person of the illegal group. Actually, I was doing all this thing alone. And immediately when journalists give me microphones and the cameras wanted to record how I getting the prize, I said that I won't speak anything in a public. When groups wants to speak, the group will speak with the public. And what was funny, because then after this, police department for war, crime and terrorism contact me to come on investigation talk. So I decided to come with a lawyer, and he explained me that I don't need to talk anything. This is my civil right, that I don't need to talk. I don't need to give any kind of information. And immediately after this, I didn't give information. The court in Split decided to charge me for damaging of a public property. So the government all the time was suggesting that I was using a tar. You know what is a tar? Tar, okay. For the roofs of the buildings and but I had because I was taking photography. When I did action, I took off the suits, and I came back as a normal person with a photo camera, and all process I was documenting. So luckily I had these photos that it wasn't used a tar but easily washable paint. So government couldn't manage to sue me for damaging of public property, because this Pedestal Square is Diocletian Palace, antique from Emperor Diocletian Palace, and it's under UNESCO heritage. So what was happened when government decided to charge me for damaging of public property? It was in August. All intellectuals in Croatia was raised, and again was full of newspapers. They decided to stay on the side of artists' right to provoke, to criticize, and to protest in the contemporary arts field. So this is shortly the whole process, which give me a certain kind of power, let's say, experience of a power which we as artists can have as a certain kind of using art as a weapon for social justice. So I will show you now a short clip about, video clip about the whole event.
Dobro večer, štovani gledatelji, dobrodošli u posjetni transfer. Iako je transfer i u ljetnoj schemi HTV-a nalazio svoje mjesto svaki drugi ponedjeljak, posve smo svjesni da su se mnogi odmarali kako od televizije, tako i od svih ostalih medija. No sasvim sigurno nije vam promakla priča zvana Crni Pedestal. Tek u rijetkim prilikama umjetnost se nađe na naslovnici. Rijetko se one medijski raspravlja. Rijetko se toliki osjećaj pozvani reći svoje o nekom umjetničkom djelu. Slijedi dakle naša kronika i komentar ovog graničnog slučaja. Crne mrlje na Pedestalu. Ako još nemate svoj stav u odnosu vandalizmu i umjetnosti, ako ne znate kako se nositi sa slobodom izraza, nadamo se da ćemo vam barem malo pomoći. Priče su koje sredine 1968. godine, kada su se mladi drznuli pisati veliku povijest. Početkom te 68. jednog siječnja ujutro, splitski Pedestal osvanuo je obojan u crveno, lako perivom bojom. Počinitelji, članovi umjetničke skupine, studenti, u policijskoj stanici traže zaštitu od svoje publike razvjerenih građana.
Za javnost to je tek vandalizam, za policiju i sudstvo remećenje javnog reda kažnjeno novčanom kaznom. Stručna umjetnička javnost u navodnom vandalizmu prepoznaje začetak nove umjetničke prakse, usklađene sa svjetskim strujama. Crveni peristi, široko komunikativno djelo čin, ključno je mjesto hrvatske umjetnosti 20. stoljeća, živo i u memoriji starijeg običnog građanstva. 30 godina kasnije. Stinoću nepoznate osobe oštetile splitski penistil, nacrtavši na antičkom trgu iz razdoblja cara Dioklecijana masnom crnom bojom krug promjera oko 3 metra. Izgleda pravi. No, crna mrlja daleko je veća, pri tome nije masna, ali već je očišćena. Tako su se nacionalnom dnevniku potkrale dezinformacije. Ona o masnoći, odnosno tatrenu, nastavit će kolati medijima sve do današnjih dana. Iz toga možemo zaključiti da je reakcija na crnu mrlju izuzetno emotivno nabijena. Crni peristil o kvaku turističkog ureda izvisio je poruku. U čast grupi Crveni peristil, 30 godina poslije. Peristil poput magičnog ogledala odražava stanje društvene svijesti. U siječnju pisak je pun crvenog i crnog peristila. Crni nas je podsjetio na crveni, te se tako pobrinuo da se u memoriju vrati značajna umjetnička baština. Stavovi se polariziraju, za ili protiv crnog peristila. Od početka je prisutna ocjena čina kao umjetničkog. Prvi čovjek Splita, gradonačelnik, daje vrlo neuku izjavu. Ovo svakako nije politička poruka, to je sigurno. No, crna mrlja na putnoj gradskoj plohi, ukoliko grad jest ono što bi trebao biti polis, ne može biti drugo do politična, što naravno ne znači da nije umjetnička. Još će reći gradonačelnik da je to čisti vandalizam, djelo koje treba maksimalno osuditi. Kako je on uz mnoge druge svojom burnom reakcijom, crnu mrlju u stvari vrlo dobro razumio, te postupio prema očekivanju autora crnog peristila. U lipnju su se zbile nagrade Zagrebačkog salona.
3 jednako vrijedne nagrade dodijeljene su anonimnoj i ilegalnoj akciji Crni peristil, te Željku Jermanu i Goranu Trbuljaku.
Crni peristil na izložbi je predstavljen novinskom dokumentacijom i tako definiran kao odraz crne mrlje ili rupe u javnom mnijenju. Nagradu je kao kontakt osoba primio Igor Grubić, te potom ubrzo pozvan na razgovor u MUP-ov odsjek za ratne zločine i terorizam. Nagrada je tako crnoj rupi dodala još vjerni odraz.
Splitska je policija podigla kaznenu prijavu protiv 29-godišnjeg Zagrepčanina koji u siječnju godine u središtu splitskog peristila prolio katran, načinivši mrlju promjera oko 8 metara. Inače, autor crnog peristila na godišnjem 33. Zagrebačkom salonu, smotri suvremenih hrvatske likovne umjetnosti, dobio je drugu nagradu za obrazloženje kako se crnim peristilom protestira protiv tvrdokorno nepromjenjive sredine, aludirajući na 1968. godinu kada splitski trg obojen u crven.
Podignuta optužnica za oštećenje tuđe stvari sadrži laž, jer o kadranu se ne radi, što je utvrdio i siječanski policijski očevid. Kako je i zašto došlo do inzistiranja na kadranu, vjerojatno ima veze sa onim mrljama na kolektivnoj duši. Laž o kadranu samo dokazuje njihovo postojanje. Radi se spekulirati o licemjerju hrvatske recentne brige za baštinu. Tako, crni peristil opet puni novinske stupce. Optužnici nitko od komentatora nije sklon. Čini se da je policija usamljena ili se samo čini. Ministar kulture ustaje u obranu umjetnika i slobodu izražavanja. 30 godina poslije crvenog peristila javnosti je prihvatljivo da se urbana intervencija, provokacija može smatrati i umjetnošću. I u crvenom i u crnom slučaju radi se o umjetničkom i društveno-kritičkom činu, o umjetnosti koja uzima pravo biti realna snaga i ne želi pristati na predodređenu marginu javnosti. Radi se o pliskom graničnom polju susreta društva, države i umjetnosti. Ovakva umjetnička provokacija svakako remeti ustaljeni javni red i tijek stvari, zato se i poduzima. Ona je test slobode i odgovornosti uključenih strana. Zdrav razum govori da reda mora biti, a jedini grijeh crnog peristila je cijena čišćenja. U usporedbi sa odrazom koji je on društvu poklonio, to je isto zanemarivo.
In the meantime, I was doing quite a lot of public art actions, interventions. I can say that certain kind of a challenge for me as an artist is also to do a site-specific work. When certain museums, curators or galleries invite me to work something in their cities on the new territories. It's a quite challenge. It's full of adrenaline. You never know will you manage also to create something which will, how to say, open certain kind of a problem to the discussion or to dissolving these certain kind of problems. So, but I will talk now only about these few actions, and one of these is related also to 1968 movement, which Vasil mentioned on announcement. It's a project which is called 366 Liberation Rituals. I did it during the 2008. It was again anniversary of 68 movement, and I decided that the whole year I will devote to this art project, and that I will make like a certain kind of a spiritual discipline for myself, that I will go every day out in the public space and do certain kind of micro-political intervention or happening. So since the year was, how to say, with the 1 day more, it was 366 days, and I did it during the whole year, every day. And it's important to mention maybe that I had certain kind of topics which I realized that I'm going to do, and so certain actions are made during the 1 day. You will see like a protest against the George Bush politics. Certain actions I've been doing for the whole week. Certain actions I've been repeating, especially when it was raining. I was doing one action with the banknotes. I was writing on the banknotes like resist to the epidemic of greed, and then I needed to go something to buy, like a chewing gum, a wine or bread, and to exchange these banknotes and putting it to circulation in the monetary system. And certain actions I did for 1 month, and so I'm going to present you now. This is the action which I called Scarves and the Monuments. I was doing it in the public sphere in the different cities whenever somebody was inviting me, or when I was travel somewhere. I was making research trying to find anti-fascist monuments. And this is important, how to say, because I decided to make these micro-interventions on the monuments, because in Croatia during the war, in the 90s, because of the strong nationalism, I'm sure that you experienced this the same. The national-oriented party, right-oriented party, decided to cut with any kind of heritage from the socialism. Even the socialism in Croatia, in ex-Yugoslavia, was much more liberal and much more democratic socialism than in the Eastern Bloc. But anyhow, they wanted to cut with this heritage, and during the war it's happened that 3,000 anti-fascist monuments have been destroyed. So I decided to one which will survive in the bigger cities, to make this kind of interventions and to make them alive. So I put these red scarves. This policeman later catch me. This is in Belgrade. I can say that whenever I was doing actions in the public space, in a symbolical way, I was wearing a worker's uniform. Another actions which I was doing by interventions in the monuments is called little quote lessons. So I realized when we are passing near the monuments in everyday life, we don't react anymore on the monuments. It's just a certain kind of a routine that these monuments are there. They represent certain kind of values, but we don't care about this, what they represent anymore, and also about these values anymore. We are certain kind of somehow sleepy in the public sphere. So this kind of interventions somehow make us alive, but also make alive also these monuments. I wanted to use the monuments that they start to speak about the certain political situation in our contemporary Croatia. So very cheap actions, very easy and simple actions. I was putting this around the really huge, big, sometimes big sculptures. Here is written, as close you are to church, as far away you are from God. Because in Croatia happened a really strong way of, how to say, clericalization. And amazingly, many people become suddenly big Catholics. But before they've been big communists. So I need to translate this. If I manage to find, because I'm missing the word, proper word on the. Patriotism is the principle that justifies wholesale murder. It's a big patriotism also in Croatia. The other quotes which I used is that one which I mentioned: the nearer you are to church, the further away you are from God. Socialism or the downfall in barbarism from Rosa Luxemburg. About patriotism was from Lev Tolstoy. This is from Rosa Luxemburg. Then this is we shattered to pieces the myth of apolitical art, Mayakovsky. And also one which was also important quotation, I found it on internet. It's not true quotation from Karl Marx, but I use it anyway. Because it's funny. The last capitalist to hang will be the one who sold us the rope. This is from Karl Marx. So in a certain way, it's always happened that people react. So you need to be, when you act in a public space, you need to be aware that people can react sometimes really brutally. So a few times I've been attacked. This is the sacrilege from Karađorđe monument in front of one of the biggest Orthodox church in Serbia, in Belgrade. And there was a huge bunch of people who was screaming on me. Sometimes it's happened that they throw something on me when these actions are happening. But I'm somehow also ready to face my certain fear. I realized that I decided to be artist. Art is my, let's say, weapon. And also this kind of experience is also important. Let's say you can rise through it. I can say that I can, by this experience, I can spiritually also rise. It's interesting when you've been attacked from the other person. The aggression, the same rise in me, but I'm trying to control also myself in this kind of communication and to explain in a peaceful way why I'm doing this. One of the actions which I did in the train station, tram station, bus station was written the same as you, I'm waiting for the change. When it's happened, inform me. It's written passive citizen. This is the banknotes, which I was doing usually when it was raining. I was writing on all banknotes, resist to the epidemic of greed. One of the actions which I was also quite often doing was changing of the negative and destructive sentences of the graffiti. So here is written with the God and Christ against the Serbs and communists. So I wrote like I know it's another one. Somewhere it's changed, but I wrote like with the God and Christ, kiss the nearest one. From the Bible. Oh, this is it. Across against the Serbs and communists, I wrote the kiss the nearest one. Often where was happened that somebody was wrote like Croatia was during the Second World War fascist collaborator. It is one of the 5 or 6 countries which was really collaborating with officially with Nazism and the fascists. So during the war in the 90s, it was happened that because of this nationalist rise, young people starting to write lots of these signs, and this is Ustaše, the name of the Croatian fascist party, which had racist laws and concentration camps during the Second World War. So I was transforming this in smiley, or like this it was written but I wrote love. This was the love, which I changed. Or I wrote, it was written I signed, it was before, you can see. Now it is like a flower. Again flower, it was written and it's interesting, this is always connected with the cross, with the Catholic Church who was supporting the fascists in the Second World War period. This is the football followers, which was written like kill another football follower team from the Dalmatia, and I wrote like a kiss, not kill, but not ubi, but ljubi. I can find where is the. Somebody wrote like some guy is a gay, and I crossed his name and wrote gay is okay. Okay, gay is okay. White power, I wrote black and white power. Yeah. Okay, this is black and white power. Okay. This is one of the actions which I did quite a lot near the factories, and all this graffiti was later recolored. So it was written, one of the sentences from the Second World War, after the Second World War in socialism, was give the factories to the workers, because factories was taken out from the capitalist owners and give it to the workers. So in the capitalist period after the war, it was happened that all factories was stolen in privatization process, was stolen from the workers and give to the capitalists. So I was write graffiti like return the factories to the workers. this is one-day action which I did during the George Bush visit in Zagreb. The whole situation in Zagreb was completely under the control of police, and even the U.S. agents was in all city present, and it was forbidden to protest. It was even forbidden to open the windows on the route where the George Bush was passing by. So I did again illegal action where I put a uniform, and I decided on the square, stock market square. This building which you see, it's Croatian National Bank, and in Croatian National Bank is a department for World Monetary Fund. So I decided to paint the fountain in red as a certain kind of protest against the George Bush politics, against the war for the oil, war for the money, and spitting the blood for the money. So I painting this red in this fountain in red. And I call this action Red Fountain. During the 2009, that's why certain action I did in 2009. It's happened that students occupied the faculty, philosophical faculty. It was happened that in 2009, government decided to think and question how the studies can be privatized, and that in that case also the students will need to pay for the studies. Until now, the studying is for free. And the students occupied the philosophical faculty, and they was sleeping for 2 months in the faculty. There was no lectures in that period. They invited me to create something, and I decided to create a site-specific intervention, because I realized that this sculpture of this poet which was poet from the end of the 19th century. But he was speaking the same things, like give the knowledge to the people, give the knowledge for free to the people. He wants to influence and to spread the knowledge for the workers and for the peasants, villagers in the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century. So they, this statue is built during the socialism. And I decided to, because his hands are quite present in the air, and I decided to connect his hands with the building. So it looks like the statue is pulling the building toward the future, let's say. So. Better future for students. And it was really interesting because a few days later somebody came and cut all ropes. This thread, yes, and these red threads, and it was interesting because students came again and connect all ropes again, and they had a guard who was keeping the monument. Because the monument and this intervention become like a symbol of the movement, visual symbol of the movement. And I also put with graffiti this sentence on the monument, and this sentence is written, and this is from his poem of this poet. you will die when you start to doubt in your ideals.
And what is the name of the poet?
Silvije Strahimir Krančević. This doesn't mean anything to you, but okay. It was really interesting. Sometimes I did, this is another support for the students. In the center of Zagreb is one big sculpture, and the name of the sculpture is Grounded Sun. So I did a legal action in the same period when students had a protest, and I called this a sun eclipse. And the interventions like this stayed for 1 week because nobody knew. People was thinking that we have permission for this intervention. I call this action, let's say this is a, photo performance. I called it Against Trash. Maybe you know this is a famous photography from the, let's say, for the American, from the American history, from the Second World War. It is a stage photography when the American army putting a flag in the Japanese Iwo Jima island. So I decided to make an irony of this photography because I wanted to make a reference to the Kyoto Protocol because America is one of the rare countries who don't want to sign the Kyoto Protocol for against the pollution of the factories. And I can show you the last action. There's more actions, but I don't want to bother you with lots of actions. So for me it was interesting when I was doing a graffiti action by changing the graffiti in the neighborhood during the Zagreb with the negative messages into positive ones. I found this graffiti with the workers' hands. This is in the area where they are building new houses. So for me it was interesting how worker become creative, and how he painted his with the dirty hands something like artwork, or almost like Altamira artwork in the caves. So I decided to make action which I will, how to say, no reprint, but remake these sections, but on the Croatian parliament. To put this, I forgot the word on English, handprint on the position where I think that it should stay, because in Parliament they should take care more about the workers' rights. Okay, so this is it. There's more actions, but it's really a lot of actions, but I don't want to bother you. Let's go on a further project. I can say that I can call this work East Side Story also public work, because I was doing it with the dancers during the 2.5 months or 3 months in the public space. So I've been invited by the Museum of Contemporary Art in Belgrade to make a site-specific work, and so I decided, when I was thinking which kind of work I can do, I realized that we have the same problem the same problem which was happening even in the war toward the minorities, and even now it's happening, but in this case I wanted to focus on the sexual minority. I remember that because my studio, I'm working in the one activist video studio. In that period I was working in that studio for 8 years, fade in. And we was filming these gay parades, tragical and brutal gay parades, which was happening in the Croatia in 2002. And the same brutality, similar brutality, even worse, was happening in Belgrade in 2001. So my first idea was to work to create a documentary. I wanted to film football followers from this certain kind of skinheads and Nazi movements, and I wanted to create a workshop with them. I wanted to create also interviews with them. But then I realized when I was watching materials all in editing that I really have a strong physical reaction. Even now, let's say 10 years later after that work, I started to work on this project in 2006 when Museum Contemporary in Belgrade invited me, and I was working for 2.5 years. So even now, 12 years later, when I see this material of this work, I have a physical reaction in stomach, how people can be brutal toward each other only because someone is different. So let's say because of this physical reaction, because of this body reaction, I decided that I will abandon the scenario and dramaturgy to create a documentary, because I realized if I will have talking heads in this documentary, I will spread emotion. So emotion won't be such a condensed, and I decided to keep condensed documentary materials, and I decided also to work with the dancers, with the body, with the dancers who can transform all this negative emotion which all of us even have. All of us have aggression. Especially you can feel this when you have your partner in front of yourself, and if you're not satisfied in a certain kind of communication. So I was thinking that also dance can be a certain kind of weapon with which can we work on this kind of certain transformation. And I decided to work with the dancers on each spot where these tragical events happen in Belgrade and Zagreb. So my idea was not to exercise choreography in some sport hall or in some closed room or gallery, but intention was to go in a public space and to exercise there, right on the point. So in that way, for 2.5 months when we've been exercising and trying to create this choreography, it was always happened that people was seeing it, people was sometimes shocked what's going on, and in that way a certain kind of communication happened also with the public. So I'm going to show you the whole work now. We have enough time, so still. Oh, sorry. I can't see anymore. Okay. Next work which I'm going to present is missing architecture. I did this project in Sicily in 2012, and I've been invited by the gallery and the curator to create a new work for one event which was happening during the summer 2012. So I was creating a work during the 9 months. I was traveling 3 times in Sicily, spending some time to make research, investigation. This is how I usually do, trying to make a big research. And I realized that I was in a small town, Modica, and I realized there's a big Muslim community, and but there is no mosques in Sicily. So when I started to communicate with them, they told me that they have mosque, but what they call mosque is actually rented apartment or rented a house where they pray. So in a communication with them, they told me that all of them was repeating the same sentence, that they are dreaming that one day they're gonna build a real classical mosque with a minaret. So I starting to think about this dream and how to make a first step toward the realization of this dream. So for this event, this festival which was happening in Sicily, I created these three symbolical elements for these possible mosques, and this is the foundations. I make interventions which symbolize foundations, minaret, and the walls of the possible mosques. So I put these posters all around the city. It was on many locations in the old town. Somebody also started to make interventions on these posters. Second step which I did was I was collaborate with Muazzin, who was playing Ezan maybe for the first time on Sicily in the public space. So I was working with him because it's a five time you have Islamic call to pray during a day. So for me especially it was really really beautiful, this one, because this small town Modica is placed in the canyon, old canyon. So that was happening in the 5 in the morning when everybody sleep, there is no cars, and this beautiful voice and song was really resonating poetically in this canyon. And the third intervention, with the fifth little interventions is I put, this is installation. Okay, I put carpets from their mosque. So actually they rent me, they give me carpets for free to support these actions of the Muslim community in the public sphere. So I was putting these carpets on the 5 important, symbolically important places. These places which have this symbolical significance. So this is the city administration. On each place, the carpets were stand for several hours. City administration, stadium. Like this is a possible 5 possible places for some possible mosque. Ex-factory, abandoned factory. In front of the Catholic Church and in the city square. So there was also different kind of reactions on this work. But the gallerist was afraid how the reactions will be, because Catholicism is really strong in Sicily. But the end, the communications was really well done, and the Muslim community was really satisfied with this collaboration. And also curator, when I started to create the work, curator told him that I'm taking as artist and he as a curator all responsibility for the possible reactions. Next work, I'm going to present you only two works and then we will finish. Next work is related to Kyiv. So when I was invited in 2014 in Toulouse to make artwork, I started to make research. Of course, I was really shocked with this, what's happening here in Kyiv in this period, all this about Maidan. And I was starting to think that I can make something with this, because I found on internet, when I make research, that Toulouse and Kyiv are brotherhood or sisterhood cities. So I started to play with this fact, and I called the project Transfer in 3 Acts. I can read the leitmotif of the work. I never presented this work earlier. The importance, significance of cultivating easily forgotten, neglected humanistic values in the whirl of easily inflammable human clashes. Instead of being a part of an everyday experience, solidarity and care for the other, especially the unknown other, in a nowadays societies of total alienation and estrangement, is not experienced but in an extreme conditions of war and disasters, crisis of solidarity. Toulouse and Kyiv are twin towns. So this is somehow my experience from the war, that people, unfortunately, we are all strangers with all our masks and the roles in everyday life. We very rarely make real contacts between each other. Art or creative game is that which can make us to make better contacts. And especially in the war disasters, people become somehow closer. When it's gone, of course, everybody is again running for their own aims. So what I did in this section, Transfer in 3 Acts, I realized that when they invited me to make interventions or happening or performance was Artist Academy, but I realized that on the other side of the bridge, Academy is in Toulouse, very near to the river. I realized that on the other side of the bridge was some old shelter which was built in 16th or 17th century for the poor people, and I decided to connect this shelter with Academy, and I get to idea to took all images from the Kiev revolution and to work with it. So I was downloading the images from the internet. I asked organizers to buy, I was work with the designer, and I asked organizers to buy like 100 cardboard boxes, and I put these images inside of the box. So each box had one image. I was thinking how to involve the public in the performance, in the work. So this is that old shelter for poor and disabled and how to say, injured people. And so I started the performance with a signal on the megaphone, like a siren, for 1 minute. And after that signal, I organized people to create a chain with a human chain, and how to say, human chain, right? Yes. And I suggested that we need to transfer these boxes to another event. So this change was long for the half kilometer from one house over the bridge to the Academy of Fine Art. And it was really funny because during the performance, during the happenings, it was interesting that also other people, passersby who was interested in what's going on, starting to participate in the performance, and they started to join us and to work with these boxes, transfer of these boxes. So this is a huge human chain. All people which were participate in the event, and this is the entrance of the academy. And we was connecting because it was organized in the way that all boxes had a certain number on it, so you can easily organize the images later. So I asked the people who was participating in this event to put photographies by the numbers. On all photographies, you can see the images of this revolutionary event in Kiev. So when they finally finished the installment of these photographies, that was visible that all these images are creating one image, which I choose to be presented as an image for this happening. So it's a huge photo. Thousands of photos creating actually one photo on the floor. And the end of performance was when I turned off the signal again from the sirens, alarm from the megaphone.
So which was this general photo, this big one?
So this is the image created by the thousands of hundreds of images from the war. And this is the original.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is the image which I found on the internet. Okay, for the last very short, just to say, I've been invited by the on the residency in the north of Italy to create some work, and I realized that near the residency, the guys who invited me, the girls who invited me on the residency are animal rights activists. And I realized that near the residency is ex-slaughterhouse. So I decided to work with the slaughterhouse. I'm also vegetarian for quite long period, and I decided to create a photo series about the animal rights. So this is like, let's say, I created the storytelling from the light to the dark. For certain reason, okay, this is the first. Do animals have legal rights? The photographs, all photographs are taken from the slaughterhouse. Do animals know their products? Do animal dreams about freedom? Do animals survive extermination? And do animals go to heaven? So luckily we managed to organize that all these photos were later presented as billboards in the public spaces. What? I don't know why Photoshop is open. Okay, I don't know how to work with this. Aha, this is you. Okay, never mind. Okay, never mind. I will go like this. Okay, this is it. We can close it. Okay, once again, thank you very much that you came and for all your attention for the whole event.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Igor. So, probably if you have any questions, you are welcome. Just raise your hands, and probably a colleague of mine, maybe Maria, will help you with that.
Igor, thank you so much. You said a bit about the context that you worked in, and but I have a more precise question about. You said you've been attacked sometimes during your actions in the city.
Yeah.
But what was the reaction of actually right radicals of Croatia on what you were doing? Did they attack you or follow? Did they know you? And a second question is later on in 2008, where you had this your big project, what was the art context in Croatia? Were there any other artists or groups who did probably something that was there any dialogue of your works and other artists?
Okay, and thanks for these questions. I've been attacked, this what I mentioned from this is a certain kind of variety of reactions of the public in the public sphere. They start to scream, or you are how to say, insulting my religious feelings, especially when it was written, as close you are to church, far away you are from God. But I wanted to rise then again this kind of communication also with this kind of person who thinks that I'm insulting their feeling, because I also feel myself spiritual, but I'm not devoted to any kind of church. I believe that some kind of a higher conscience is existing, but I'm trying to living it in my way, this kind of connections with it higher conscience who all of us have in ourselves. Okay, this is a longer philosophical thought. Sorry, I won't go in this direction. Let me turn back. Yes, certain kind of security guard was attacking me, police interventions and priest intervention. I didn't show one performance which I was doing in the church. But these right-oriented followers usually criticize on the net, on the internet. But I don't involve myself in this kind of communication on internet. Regarding the 2008, of course, there was a lots of artists. There's several artists who work politically. Let's be honest, there is not so much artworks in the public space. Most of the artworks are presented in the galleries system. And but there's several artists which I really admire and respect, which work similarly in activistic way. Sanja Iveković, Andreja Kulunčić, Siniša Labrović, Marko Marković, Vlado Martek. These are artists from the variety of generation. Older generation and younger generation. I mentioned few of them now. There's a younger artist also who work. I don't know. I think it's important to intervene even with this kind of micro political works. What I can say. When I started to work as an artist, I was abandoned idea that I will do a hermetic works which will be how to say understandable only to artist, cultural or intellectual elite. So sometimes that this kind of interventions can look simple, naive, kitsch. But I don't care. I think this is all kind of weapon which I'm trying to use to communicate with this art language in the public sphere. And when I think how to create actions, as I mentioned, I'm always trying that this is understandable. I can say that Russian constructivists was much important for me. When I was young, I discovered Russian constructivism in the 80s in the middle school, and it's influenced me a lot. This power of their designed language, way of using forms and messages, and the idea that they can how to say believe that people should be, wider people, public should be educated in this period, beginning of the, I'm talking about beginning of the 20th century, with the art, workers and everyone. And that knowledge should be spread to the people. These ideas of constructivists are quite I find them still quite alive. So that's why I was using also these colors, red and black, like Russian constructivism. When I'm trying to create idea for the working in the public space, I have these several how to say elements which are always important for the construction of the work. One of these that I'm trying to create something like ideogram or pictogram, that it's really easily recognizable and fast recognizable in a public sphere. Because I think that when we walk in a public sphere on the streets, we don't care about what's going on. We are just running for our aims. We are in our heads. And we don't care what's going on around. We don't have time to stop even. So you need to catch attention from the public somehow. And I think that in that way, creating these simple, easy readable gestures, maybe you can manage. And you can manage to stop them. Even to stop and to laugh, or stop to react aggressively, or stop to, you know, to turn the how to say, this cardboard with the written text on the monuments. So,
Was your work Red Fountain was a conscious reference to the triangle of Sanja Iveković?
No. Yes, but yes. I
The visit of Bush and
visit of Tito. Yes, but okay. In this way, it can have a certain kind of similarity. But she created minimal private, intimate provocation, and I did public provocation. But honestly, when I created this work, I didn't think about this.
This fountain was in a triangle.
Like a triangle. Wow, this is a good association. Yeah, you are right. Yes, but in that way I reacted against the Bush politics. That can be triangle who birthed the war against, who spilled the blood for the... Okay, triangle who spilled the blood, yes. Okay. Yes, but... yes, but for this action, for example, I had... this is also what can happen. I had assistant with me, a young photographer, and it's happened that several times during this project, 360 celebration rituals, I changed the photographers. Because of these reactions of the public, photographers didn't want to work anymore. They was afraid. So for this red rectangle, red fountain, was happened that I had photographer who needed to follow the all action. I was in the suit, worker suit. And the guards was there. You could see on the photographs, but he took only one photo, unsharp, even without me on the photo, and he ran away. And when I called them later, because I gone after the, I put a liquid paint in the fountain because I realized that that water is circulating in the fountain. I make research. So this is the same water. So in that way I realized if I put liquid paint in the water, it will paint slowly the water completely. And so I took off the uniform, workers which I had, and called the guy, and he told me that he don't have photographs. I said, but okay, but we need to so another step after the action is to spread the photographs to the newspapers, like from my experience from Black Pedestal. So I realized, but photographs are important. Come on, nobody will have photographs except passerbys who took it by the phone. And immediately I took his camera, actually my camera, which I gave to him. I went again on the place. I have a press card, a fake press card, which I made for myself, usually to enter the museums around the world, so for free. So I have fake. So I have. You can all doing this. It's a good. And so I took this. I have a fake press card, and I said, okay, I'm a journalist. I'm just taking photos. I found the situation, and I made the old photographs. Usually, from all these actions, when I am not visible in the photo, I took these photos. Other photos, when I'm on the photo, other photographers did.
No one noticed how you put the color to the fountain?
No, because I came and I sit on the fountain and put it slowly in the water. 2 bottles. On one side of the fountain, 1 bottle. On another corner, another bottle. And since the water is circulating, I took... it's funny, maybe also in a certain way, that I took 2 bottles from Coca-Cola from 2 liter, and I cut the roof to make the bottles open, and I fill it with the red pigment. So, in a symbolical way, Coca-Cola, Bush, and America. So, protest against all this.
I wanted to ask you about the word kitsch, because you mentioned it, and I associated it with the posters that you put on the trams. And if you could elaborate on using kitsch as a weapon, as you mentioned it, because I know it's getting very popular, this kitsch way of public interaction. How to use it as a weapon? I would like.
This is a question actually how to use aesthetic as a weapon. So That's what I tried to explain earlier. How I create certain kind of ideograms that it can be really understandable immediately, like a certain kind of a poster in a public space. So sometimes I say that this work can sometimes look kitsch, or some other my works which I work. For example, I had work with workers, series of photographies. It's a multi-layered work, which I work with miners in Serbia, which created a protest against the George Bush, and that ended with the fall of Slobodan Milošević. My apologies. Okay, of Slobodan Milošević in Serbia. And for me it was important that miners realize that they can have a power in their hands, and because they produce 50% of electricity in Serbia, and when miners decided to support the protesters on the street in Belgrade, it was a crucial moment when army and police realized that they can't say anymore that protesters are public enemies, because this is the workers who really hard earn money. So this is one of the works where I wanted to focus on this, let's say, power which workers can have in their hands. So I call this work Angels with the Dirty Faces. I wanted to say that, okay, angels, that workers can have a dirty hands and the dirty faces, but actually politicians are that one who look very clean, very, how to say, but actually their souls are dirty, while with the workers it's quite opposite. Politicians are manipulating with the people and stealing the private property in this privatization process. So how I describe this? I described it in the way that I draw the wings on the background in the factory, this mining factory, and the workers were standing in front of the wings and changing the positions. So I have series of photographies. This is the part of the work. Also, work have a certain reference to the Wings of Desire from Wim Wenders, and I created also video work about the fall of Milošević. But for these photographies, which are certain kind of iconic photography, you can say also it's a little bit kitsch. But in that moment, I don't care, because I was work with miners, and when I spoke with them, the same like with the Islamic community, when I work with this minority and with people who are maybe not attending the art world, who are maybe not educated at all about the art, I want to create a work which will be really understandable, first for them. And so I did the same once in a prison with the prisoners where I work. So for this work I can say that they can have a certain kind of elements of a kitsch. It's really maybe edgy, on the edge, but actually I don't care anymore. Before I was scared about this, afraid. Will intellectuals or theoreticians say this is a kitsch? But now I don't care anymore. I mean, for me it's important that this work communicate with a wider public. For this work was really interesting because I created in 2004-2006 this with the miners with the wings, and this work was exhibited only few times in Balkan area, And I can say that for 5 or 6 months the work wasn't present in the art world at all. But suddenly curators for Manifesta in Belgium, which they created Manifesta in a Genk, which was mining fields, in a Genk, and they wanted to show this work with the miners, and they chose the work with the miner as the main image of Manifesta. So it was full, the Belgium was full of these city lights and the billboards with the workers with the wings. So even if it can be a little bit kitsch, it can also sometimes I don't know, have it public, how to say. And after the Manifesto, that work became really popular, and I was exhibiting it everywhere. Sometimes it also needs time that certain work is discovered. Okay, I'm not sure did I answer to your question, but I tried.
Yeah, at the very end, I would really like to thank so much to you again for your presentation. I think we've seen a lot of really disturbing things and stuff. And that's for me, also speaking from my personal experience, I would say that in this case, what I really appreciate very much is that art is not an instrument to overcome this disturbance, but rather the opposite, fueling it more and more. So I think it's really very right, sort of proper approach that art serves as a kind of fueling these things to remain being disturbing, right? And I think it's really very fascinating. Thank you again, and just short notice at the very end that we will continue the project next Friday on the 18th of May with a lecture by Chantal Mouffe